Good morning. My name is Angela Boyery, and today I'm going to touch on a really light subject, moral relativism and moral objectivism. So moral relativism says that what we consider to be good or bad is unique to every culture and actually unique to each individual. Moral relativism accepts that no two people have the same moral compass, and that morality is a continuum with many varying shades between good and bad, not necessarily a concrete good or bad. Moral objectivism, on the other end, looks at morality in a black and white kind of view. Certain actions are universally bad and some are universally good. Whichever way. Okay, why is moral relativism, what is moral relativism? We went over that. Why is moral objectivism flawed? As we all know, nothing in life is black and white. Trying to understand behavior without consideration for context only gives us half the story and usually does not serve justice. Imagine going through the court system where all the judges, prosecutors, and jurors just use concrete good or bad. They didn't listen to the context, they didn't listen to the evidence, the story, nothing surrounding. Is killing always bad? A moral objectivist might say that all killing is inherently bad, but as we know, that's not always the case. This point of view draws a clear line in the sand and leaves no room for interpretation of the context of the situation, which is really important when dealing with issues of morality and ethics. A relativist would ask, when is killing someone right? Because they concede that sometimes killing is right or necessary, or good, as we may have to call it. Even in developed countries like the U.S., killing is considered acceptable punishment for certain crimes like treason, drug trafficking, and sexual assault. It's reasonable to conclude that not all killing is bad, and killing is even socially acceptable if the death has benefit to an individual in danger or a society. Think, putting down prisoners, prisoners on death row. We deem that necessary and beneficial for our society, so we kill them. A good example of a situation where killing is not always bad is last year in Shiner, Texas, a man discovered a 47-year-old man raping his 5-year-old daughter. When he was alerted of the abuse, he ran over to where the abuse was happening and beat the man to death. The father was not charged with any crime. He was not charged for murder or anything like that because his actions were deemed as justifiable homicide, which is an example of when killing is good. This image on the left here, a few of y'all may remember, maybe 2 years ago in 2012, it's George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. And George Zimmerman, the man on the left, was part of a neighborhood watch when he got into an altercation with Trayvon Martin. And in self-defense, killed Trayvon. And he was found not guilty under Florida's Stand Your Ground statute. Another scenario where killing is legal and somewhat socially acceptable in some places of the world is when an unborn fetus poses a direct health risk to a mother, such as an ectopic pregnancy or preeclampsia. Ectopic pregnancies are extremely dangerous for the mother and, unfortunately, always end in the fetus being terminated. Cases of preeclampsia can lead to very horrible outcomes in mother and the baby, including retinal detachment, seizures, or strokes, low birth weight for the child, or breathing difficulties in newborns, or death for either mother or child. In these severe and rare cases, where maternal death is a very possible outcome, not aborting the fetus would place the mother's rights below that of the fetus and could be classified as homicide by omission or inaction. Now, obviously, I'm not putting my own personal opinion in here, but we can see clearly that the opinions vary widely across the globe on this hot-button issue, and there's no clear right or wrong. This issue has been debated forever, and will probably continue to be debated forever. Cannibalism. Cannibalism has long been regarded as a taboo practice, and even though most cultures reject cannibalism as barbaric and inhumane, we know that people have sometimes had to resort to cannibalism, and there are even remote tribes, like now in Papua New Guinea, where they still practice cannibalism as part of their religion or like rituals. And here is an example of the Karawai tribe, that's in Papua New Guinea, and they still to this day practice cannibalism. They believe that if they consume the brain of their deceased ancestors or family members, that they gain their courage. This image on the left is an image of a Uruguayan, back in 1972, a Uruguayan rugby team crashed into the Andes Mountains, and they were stranded there for 2 months. And all of the rugby team had to consume the bodies of their deceased teammates and a few family members in there. And, you know, no one could really fault them for that. It was necessary or deemed good because they survived. Historians have documented instances of human sacrifice across all cultures and as far back as 3500 BC. The ancient Aztecs are well known for practicing abhorrent and gory displays of human sacrifice to please their deity and keep the world in balance. They literally believed that in order to keep the sun revolving around the earth, they had to sacrifice their strongest and most virile men. Carnage and human sacrifice literally kept the world in order according to their culture, and those who were sacrificed would join the battle against the darkness. In conclusion, if history has really taught us anything, it's that good and bad are ever-changing concepts in every society. Standards change, public opinions change, and cultures change over time. The laws that govern us change with times to reflect the current attitude of the culture. The idea that there is a universal good and bad contradicts human nature and ignores the fact that what may be good for one person is not necessarily good for another. Thank you. Sarah?
What led you to choose this topic?
Reading The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis in class, like we all have been. I don't know, I felt like it was such a loaded topic that there was just like no way to not, I don't know, it was really interesting to me, and I felt like any way that I attacked this topic, I could come up with something, you know, and I don't know, maybe it was a little too heavy. It was kind of a broad topic. Yes, sir?
What would Lewis say about your...
Lewis would be, he would be an objectivist. He would be of the thinking, he actually in his book, he calls it the Tao, which is kind of like an accumulation of all religious scriptures from Eastern and Western religions to he kind of sets up essentially like a 10 Commandments, right? And his Tao says, you know, like one of the pillars is killing is wrong, and stealing is wrong, and this and this and this, you know, and he thinks that there is an exact right or wrong, good or bad. I'm arguing against his point. Anybody else have a question?
So,
Yes, sir.
so how does society work then today?
How does society
I
work
mean,
then today? Wow, I mean, loaded topic, right?
This is another topic.
That assumes that it
but again,
works.
you're talking about, the very first part of this was the judicial system, okay? You said, you know, we shy away from black and white, and yet we have to have laws, we have to have rules.
We have to have a concrete
Exactly.
good or
We have to
bad.
have something there.
Yeah.
A judge, I mean, when you think about it, a judge is the most powerful person in the entire world when it comes down to it.
Mm,
A judge can control your destiny, right there.
Sure.
Because it isn't as nice as what you would like to say that everything is black and white. It still comes into personal interpretation, it still comes into his experience, it still comes into a lot of that. And a lot of these things, I mean, every one of those topics that you brought up were very, I mean,
just monstrous.
yes, they're monstrous,
Yeah.
exactly. But it even gets down to the lower levels of other things, other crimes and things that aren't as glorified as what you put up there. So how
So
does
basically
things
your
work?
question is, how does that operate
Yeah,
in
how does
court
that
of law? I can't,
operate?
it's, my answer to that is that it can't be one way or the other. It can't be just relativism or just objectivism, because that's a flawed system. Obviously there's going to be a mixture of both. Across a lot of cultures we see laws that say don't murder, don't steal. And these are just kind of, I don't know, laws that we find that tie together everywhere. I mean, I shy away from the word universal because that's the whole opposite point that I'm trying to make here, right? Morgan?
Okay, since he kind of mentioned the judge thing, I was curious what you thought about the Supreme Court. Obviously, when a Supreme Court gets appointed, they start for life because they don't want to be able to be swayed by outside opinion, things like this. How much do you think this has to play into this when you're a judge and you have to ignore everything outside of you? You know, how much do you think this plays into the good and bad? Do you think somebody that's in the Supreme Court or a judge truly tries to step away from being biased towards one thing or another?
I mean, I think that's kind of a huge question too. I think that in order to be, and obviously I'm not a judge, I don't know anyone who is a judge, but I think in order to be probably an effective Supreme Court judge, you have to first of all uphold the law because, I mean, you have to follow the Constitution, that's just your job. If you can't do that as a judge, then what kind of judge are you? But as far as like how they have to balance out these two things, I'm sure that just depends on like the personal preference or the personal opinions of this person, you know, like, and I think that's why, you know, is it 8 on the Supreme Court? 9. That's why there's 9, because, you know, you can't just have one. Everyone has a different opinion, brings something different to the table, their own moral compass, because each person has their own unique moral compass, you know? And, yeah, hope that answered your question, kind of. Anybody else have one?
I do. You mentioned C.S. Lewis, his book being part of the inspiration for you jumping into this thing.
Absolutely.
What other source do you say, which source was the next most influential in terms of what you ended up with here?
See, I know the brownie point question would have been Communist Manifesto.
Yeah.
Honestly,
I don't like brownies that much, really.
Honestly, a lot of the research and information that I got up here, and didn't cite my source, but was just from like published psychology papers and research and stuff like that. Mostly in psychology and obviously history. Nothing real specific besides the book.
So there wasn't one other source that really just pops up and like grabbed your attention?
No. Just since we've been reading Abolition of Man in class, obviously, and we've talked about it several times, and I just thought that that was such a huge topic that I could put anything, attach any source to that, anything, and find, you know, because, I mean, morality exists everywhere. Morality exists in the decision I made to put on these shoes today. Like, do what?
I say good grief, this whole topic is like really, really.
Oh, it's way too big. Way too big. But, yeah, hopefully that answered your question. Anybody else? Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Hey Angela, could you log out of my list?
She is named.
No, we decided that.
You're trapped.
Information.
We're going to find all your secret stuff.
Yeah, well, that's a spider.
And we're going to put it up on YouTube.
Yeah, just the usual stuff.
There you go, baby.
Thieves.